Good evening, everybody. TJ Stevens here at PW Mania. This evening, I'm joined. This is the first non-wrestler I've ever done an interview for. We have senior referee Mike Chioda is here. Mike, how are you doing?
Man, I'm doing good, TJ. How you doing? Thanks for having me on.
I like to do some research, as opposed, I guess any good interviewer would. I guess that doesn't really set me apart. But I like to do some research before I do an interview, and I found out that did you know you're the longest tenured referee in WWE history?
Yeah, I've heard of that. I've heard of that. That's the rumor going around. So
31 years.
yeah, I actually I've been with the company I was with WWE 35 years and then started refereeing at like 87. Chief Jay Strombo and Gorilla Monsoon made me a referee. Joey Morella helped me out. Um, Earl came to the business a year or two later, helped me out a lot. At that time, Danny Davis, Tim White,
Mm.
a lot of guys used to help me out. Even like we used to do certain territories, and you'd work with Dick Kroll and Dick Worley and all these old school timers and all the old timers. And I grew up in the era where in the '80s, man, you worked with some old school wrestlers and you
Mm-hmm.
learned a lot, man. So it was great. So I mean, '87, I started refereeing. I was doing crew when I first started and did crew for so many years. And then '89, I made a debut on TV with WWE.
So
So it's
I'm
been
glad you brought up Dick Worley because he's not really a
right,
name we hear all that often anymore.
right.
Um,
Great
and
guy, man. He's a great guy.
I was covering a show once, an older show. It was late '80s, I believe,
Right,
and Dick Worley was on, and we noticed that he was wearing wrestling boots.
right, right.
Why was that?
He was just one of a kind. You know, we went through a phase in the WWE for a while. I remember somebody said, one of the agents said, "Oh, they should wear referee boots," and we were like, "What?" So we had to call high spots and go here, try to get these referee boots. Black sneakers were fine. I used to always like to wear 3/4, you know, high tops,
Mhm.
black sneakers, tape your ankles at times to support your ankles if you had a 30, 40-minute match or so at a pay-per-view or on Raw, SmackDown, or so forth. So, I mean, wrestling boots weren't really needed, but Dick Worley, he's the one who pulled it off. That's for sure back in the day.
It definitely caught your attention.
Yeah, it definitely did. Because he was the white laces, right? The
Yes.
black and
Yep.
white and white laces. But
Hmm.
he was always a real neat, had to be looking good guy, man. He was a great guy, good referee back then, and he was an old school. That's for sure. He's a legend in the referees. To me.
So we're gonna talk about referee legends a little bit later. I'm gonna save that part for last. So,
You got it.
um, how did you get interested in becoming a referee, and what does breaking in as a referee in the '80s look like?
Well, I didn't expect to be a referee. I didn't have any intentions to referee. I was doing crew and I did the ring crew in '83 for Gorilla Monsoon when he owned the territory for Vince Senior. When I
Mhm.
used to work for Victor Quiones, uh, and he used to run a ring for a Gorilla. And Gorilla used to own the territory in the South Jersey, Philadelphia Spectrum, Salisbury, Maryland, Wildwood, New Jersey, back in the day in the '80s. And I used to work in the summer times for them on ring crew. And when I went back, I worked for a couple of years, on and off, weekends, summer times, and made a shitload of money working back then. I mean, you're talking in 1983, I was like, what, 16 years old or something like that. So, I mean, I was making $50 for the road, $50 for doing the timekeeping, $50 for playing the music, $50 for doing the ring. And then had sell programs because Joe Morella didn't want to sell programs. Tony Timmel didn't want to sell programs. I was the youngest, kid on the block there. So they were $1 a piece back then, but I used to make 10 cents off the dollar. I sold 3,000 programs. I made $500 a night.
Wow.
Went back into wrestling when my father got sick. When I was about 18, I asked Gorilla for a job back. They got my job back. I got a job and they got me in the door again. And it took off from there. And then, breaking into the business of refereeing. Like I said, in '87, Chief J one day just turned around and he goes, "I'm tired of these fucking New York State Commission refs." And he looked at me and he goes, "Tomorrow afternoon, get a black pair of jeans, a blue shirt, long sleeve shirt, and a bow tie." And I said, "What?" I'm like, what am I, a waiter now? I'm thinking, serve drinks and the boys like, and you're gonna be refereeing Dynamite. He's calling me Dynamite Kid. And I said, okay, Chief. He goes, like, give me the receipt. He goes, and buy yourself a couple shirts, a couple pairs of, jeans and stuff. And I was like, holy shit. And he goes, yeah, I just talked to Gorilla. And I said, I'm tired of these New York State Commission refs, because some of them wouldn't show up, some were late, and then a lot of them didn't know what they were doing in the wrestling business. So there was my start right there. And I was just like, holy shit. And my first match was Barry Horowitz and Steve Lombardi.
Wow.
But a lot of the boys in the old school timers, George Steele and a lot of the old school guys, Tony Gurria and they helped me out. And Rick Martel. Them guys were a bunch of great guys back in the 80s. Tito Santana, Pedro Morale, a bunch of guys. They were just very helpful back in the day.
So you mentioned New York State Athletic Commission referees. Now,
Right.
some of our younger viewers / listeners may not understand what that means. So before each company had, their own roster of referees, which I would say was probably mid to late 80s, that became a very normal thing. How
Right.
did the Athletic Commission supply referees? And from what I've heard, they were usually a disaster.
Yeah, they were. They were a disaster, a lot of them. There were only quite a few like commission guys. Like I remember, I think there was like Roger Ruffin, maybe out of Ohio. There was Roger Ruffin. I know he was out of Ohio. Dick Kroll was always doing Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. He was good. But some of the New York State guys, man, it just had a lot of heat with the agents, and that's where it turned. I mean, they would supply like 2 referees, and they would have to, we would use 2 referees, they would use 2 referees. It came down to the point. Remember that next day, New York State didn't work, and I wound up doing like 4 or 5 matches, and Joey did like 3, or somebody else did, So it was like, holy shit, he wasn't using them all. So we were using 2 referees on the show, 1 crew ref and 1 full-time ref.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how that would work. And then a lot of refs would show up with all the TV and stuff like that.
So when the Athletic Commission would supply referees, a lot of the time, from what I've read and I'm to understand, the referees that they supplied weren't wrestling referees.
No, not really. They were just boxing referees.
Yeah.
They had basically, it is now you need a real, like a referee, professional referee entertainment license in a lot of states. But back then it was kind of weird. It was just kind of like they called it boxing wrestling, it was like slash with the commissioner. So, those referees, even, I mean, to the Garden, to working match, and that was the important part, where Madison Square Garden, Nassau Coliseum, all the way up to upstate New York when we used to run Poughkeepsie. We used to run Binghamton, Syracuse, Rochester, all the way up to Buffalo. Mm-hmm. So it eliminated all those state commission referees all the way up the line there.
So it says your first notable show was Survivor Series 89.
Right.
How do I want to phrase this question? How was the wrestling business different in 89, especially WWE? Because WWE has done a lot of evolving in the last 40 years. So how was the wrestling business different in 89 than, say, even 93, 94, a couple years later, when you really start to make a name for yourself in referees? So you're young here. It's Survivor Series 89, loaded with big names.
Right.
What was that like for you?
Man, it was fantastic. I mean, Survivor Series, I remember that first one, man, in 89. Stressed like a son of a bitch, man, because, I mean, I went to Joey Morel, and I'm like, hey, how the fuck do you remember all these matches, like all the finishes on these matches? Because, I was stressed. And you talk to the boys, and like, I'm 2 years into the business already on my, made my TV debut. I'm on TV now. And like, that was one of my most stressful matches in the beginning of my career. And I remember Joe, he was like, don't worry about it. He's like, just try and talk to the boys. And he goes, and he shows me his hand, right? And he's got all 5 finishes written down on his hand. This one over this one, this one over this one, the third with this one over, because we didn't have IFPs.
Right.
Timekeeper Mark Ayton used to hold a pencil in his mouth for the cues, and give us the one, and the fingers, would go over the times. If you give one for 5 minutes and this and that, and we had always had codes with the fingers on time. The go home cue, real strong, was like the pencil in the mouth. So there was no communication back to Gorilla. So, and that just I became way later on to where we got communication back to Gorilla from Gorilla. So they could talk in the ear. Now you could talk back to Gorilla. But back then it was stressful. So I did, man. Joey got me through that. I wrote it all down on one hand, and he said, just make sure it don't sweat and don't run off. So, I mean, you get the match go over in your head, and that sure did. That cheat sheet right there helped me out in my first pay-per-view at Survivor Series there. And I mean, the talent back then in the 80s and 90s going into the Attitude Era, there was so many guys that just had gimmicks, man, and they took, I'm not saying the talent these days doesn't protect their gimmick or really take their gimmick serious or their character or anything like that. But those guys it was just so many different characters, man, so many different gimmicks, characters, and they played the parts well, man. And there was no schooling, no training, no PC center, no nothing.
Mm-hmm.
It was like they grew up, just had personality, most of them. If you look at all the individuals like Hogan and Macho Man and this one and the Dino Bravos and this one, it just goes on down the line, like the Ted DiBiase's and Virgil and the Fugees, and everybody had a good gimmick. And it was just fun. It was fun to work with the old school back then. It really was.
Well, 89, you're coming to the tail end of the territories, right? So a lot of these
right.
veterans like Macho Man and even Hogan had bounced around a little bit. They'd bounced around these territories. If people don't know the story of Randy Savage's territory days, whoa,
right.
in Memphis, I mean, that was nuts.
Right.
But so you do Survivor Series 89, and then you do WrestleMania 7. I mean, there's a couple year gap in there in between, obviously, but
right.
WrestleMania 7 is the interesting one. This is the one from LA that moved from the Coliseum to the sports arena.
Okay.
What are your memories of WrestleMania 7, just in general, and then we'll get to Hogan and Slaughter specific after this answer.
Yeah, that was just at that time too, I was doing a lot of crew all the time. Me and Tony Chimmel had a ring crew out of New Jersey. We were one of the major crews because he was a ring announcer. I was a referee too, and we both set up the ring. We played music. We did everything. We were one-stop shop on the ring crew, and we set up the steel cages. We would take them on with us with the ring. And I remember that time from the Coliseum to the Staples Center, it was going to be way less than a smaller setup for us.
Mm-hmm.
And we were, when we did 92, we did Wembley Stadium with 80. I want to say 80 something thousand, 82 plus thousand people with Bret Hart and Bulldog, the main event there with Joey Marella did that match. And that was an unbelievable stadium to set up. But we thought it was going to be another stadium set up like that, So, we went to the Staples. It was nothing really, as far as production, it was a lot easier to set up in the Staples Center.
What do you remember about, the level of comfort backstage when Sergeant Slaughter turned heel in the way that he did during the time that he did? Because I've heard horror stories about Sergeant Slaughter's heel run in 91.
Right. You got to remember those days, the company fed off of what was going on, whether it was worldwide, international.
Mm-hmm.
When you had the Iron Sheik and he would do his Iranian thing, and you had Sergeant Slaughter doing this, and you had the Russians and Nikolai Volkov boy, I mean, it was just, they'd feed off of what the country was going through sometimes and what was happening around the world, with certain talent. I mean, I think it was a great deal where, I mean, it's just heat. It's like major heat. That's what Vince, he didn't give a shit really back then. It might be a little bit more different these days, but I doubt they're going to be working angles of what's going on around the world now, but like they did back then. But I think it was great heat. And then a lot of it was success. I mean, and Hogan was the real American,
Yes.
He came to everybody, take your vitamins, do this, and I'm the real American. And He's unbelievable. I just ran into him in Clearwater a couple weeks ago. He looks great. So,
I remember this. This is probably the first angle I can remember as a kid.
right.
So the first one that sticks in my head. WWF brought in Adnan Al-Kaisi just for this angle, also from the AWA, who's legit Iraq and was actually childhood friends with Saddam Hussein to add to
Right.
the
Right.
realism of the angle.
Right.
And to your point, I don't know if this works today because
No.
everyone remembers the debacle of Muhammad Hussein,
Right.
and it's but I'm yeah, heat's a good word.
No,
Sorry.
I mean, they did some things back then. I doubt that company would get away with these days.
No.
Um, so back then they used to do certain things where it was just like, oh my God, and to think about it, sometimes what we would do on TV was just crazy, especially during the Attitude Era. I mean, tits were flying everywhere, and TNA, Triple H or Shawn Michaels or anybody would say, "Hey, lift them shirts up." I'd be in the ring, and all of a sudden you see like a dozen girls lifting their shirts up and bras off. Like, oh shit!
I have picked the right profession.
Right. Talk about having control of a crowd, and the fans. Boy, that was amazing. So, and then going into the Attitude Era, then into the Rock and Hogan match, it was just that was phenomenal.
You go from sort of this. I mean, WWF was doing television tapings, but nothing live.
Right.
Um, you had All Star Wrestling and Prime Time and all those different things. But then you go live in Raw in '93. So what? And actually, you were the referee for 1-2-3 Kid beating Razor Ramon
Right.
on
Yeah,
Raw.
Manhattan
So
Center. Right.
what was, from a referee's perspective, what was different about going from, say, a primetime wrestling scenario to live as a referee?
Oh, it's unbelievable. When we went and started doing the Manhattan Center, I mean, we lived in Jersey, so it would take us. That was one of the closest shots to go to do TV, which was awesome because we'd be on the road 25 days a month anyway. So with the ring truck and everything, driving all over the country. Um, so we'd go there, and that was setup was the worst setup at all. But what a payday, what a payoff it was working that little like that theater is just such an awesome crowd, and it was like your Madison Square Garden crowd, but crammed into like 2,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and that crowd was just energized and just had so much energy, and just it was a New York City wrestling crowd, man. It's awesome, and working in that was just phenomenal because then it was on live TV. Doing the Razor Ramon match, the 1-2-3, it's amazing how like later on in your career, there's so many matches you did that weren't even title matches, whether it
Mm-hmm.
was Razor Ramon, 1-2-3 Kid, Rock and Hogan, this one, that one, and there weren't even title matches. It became to be one of the most popular matches in professional wrestling, And I remember Razor telling me that night, just love working with him, man. Hell of a worker, hell of a guy. And I got a nice, real cool poster framed of him, man. He signed it to me many years ago. But I remember him telling me that night, he goes, Kai, he wasn't too happy. He was like, God damn, I got to put this kid over. Like these guys took their shit serious
Yeah.
back then. Whether it was fucking Sean telling Brett, I ain't doing a job for you, or Brett telling Sean, I wasn't doing a job for you, or, you're coming up to Razor saying, we got to put this kid over, and he's like, what? Well, it's going to be a fucking something quick, and he comes up to me, he goes, Coyote, I don't give a fuck what you do, brother. You better give me the fastest count you got without making it look stupid. If you noticed, I sped up that count so fast. It was like, boom, 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 boom. But yeah, I mean, the crowd went ballistic in that little place, man, Manhattan Center, and they got over what they got the kid over right there. That was people still talk about that match.
Yes. And what's interesting too, it's probably the only time I can remember where somebody lost and it turned him babyface.
Right.
Razor was babyface within weeks of that
Right.
that match
Right.
happening.
Right.
And what I enjoyed about Raw after that is they kept messing with that scenario no matter who it was. I remember PJ
Yeah.
Walker, who was PJ Polacco or Just Incredible, upset IRS one
Right.
night on Monday Night Raw because Razor Ramon interfered in the match, and they
Right.
just kept doing it over and over. I think 1, 2, 3 Kid upset somebody else on like
Yeah.
Superstars. They just
Right.
kept doing it. No, it's DiBiase. He
Oh,
beat DiBiase a few
DiBiase.
weeks later.
Okay. Gotcha. All right. Yeah, I mean, that was great. Yeah, that night. I think the night Kid beat Razor, I think what Macho Man was commentating, Bobby
Yes,
Heenan, Gorilla maybe or something. I mean, what a commentary, like right there. It was
I'm
Gorilla. I think it was Bobby Heenan, Macho Man. I
and
don't know if it was,
Vince.
and Vince. That's
Yeah,
right. It was Vince. That's right.
it
I
was
mean,
it was
look at that team right there.
it was
You
just after the Rob Bartlett experiment ended. It was right after that.
Okay. But yeah, I mean, that was a fantastic time, man. That's unbelievable.
Do you remember who refereed the 1, 2, 3 Kid Bret Hart title match in '94?
Oh, I do not.
Because that was, I mean, to me, that's the best television title match I've ever seen still to this day.
Right, right. That's a good question.
I'm actually it hmm, might have been I want to I might be one to say it's Jack Doan now
Okay,
refereed that
Jack
one.
Dome. Might have, yeah. Yeah, because Charles wasn't with us at that time in that year.
Right. So '94, I think it was you, Tim White, Jack Doan,
Earl Hebner.
Earl Hebner. It might have been Hebner. Now you say that.
Yeah, I think it might. That would probably be maybe a Hebner spot there. Maybe Jack Dome. Not too sure though.
So you mentioned the Attitude Era, and that's
Right.
where we're headed to next.
Yep.
When at what point did you realize, because I mean you're in the ring for all these matches, you see all the crowds firsthand.
Right.
When did you realize that the product was really starting to make a change to be a little more rough around the edges? Because they didn't just jump into it, they tiptoed in it for a while and then they really went all in.
Well, yeah, they tiptoed around. You had the China, you had Triple H, and you had Shawn Michaels and all that. And they kind of made that move right around, I guess, where 97 would
Mm-hmm.
I would say with Shawn, you screwing Brett, I mean, not Shawn, there's basically, just a screw job there, so I mean, and Shawn just took the business to another level, which I think the company with Vince and so many people, the top guys, Vince's right hand man, whether it was Pat Patterson and Michael Hayes and on down the line, they just knew that Shawn Michaels and these guys and Triple H were to take the business to another level. Which they did. And we had so much talent. I mean, we had so much talent.
Mm-hmm.
Undertaker and just all down, all down. I can sit here and just list so many names, 20 names. But I'm thinking, Brett didn't like the way business was going in 97 and the way what we were doing on TV. Brett had a lot of young
Right.
kids at the time. He didn't like the way the business was going. I think he was going to do business for Shawn somewhere else, instead of Montreal, maybe get out of Canada, do business in the States, turn it over. It didn't work out that way. But then, like I said, Shawn and them guys, and, there was a rocky road where we were losing them to the WCW with the Monday Night Nitro Wars and Raw Wars. We were losing to them for a while,
Mm-hmm.
and then Big Show showed up. It was just, it was a huge thing there. I mean, they were just blowing us out of the, and then all of a sudden you lose Hogan. They start, you lose Hogan, you lose Ray, you lose all these guys. They start this NWO. Then we're trying to bounce back. And then what does DX do? They come up with this thing in Virginia. I remember we were there and they go take off in his tank and stuff. And, and they start the fucking war, which is great. That it really right there was a turning point for our company making a comeback at
Yeah.
that point. Thank God for them because, you know, we didn't know if we were going to be working down south for Ted Turner and I'm thinking, man, how are they going to hire a guy from New Jersey? At that time, I'm with the company at least 15 years, thinking, man, I'm going to be out of a job at that point. So, it was kind of, and then a few years down the road, we buy out WCW and Charles and Nick Patrick and them guys came working for us, which was
Right.
awesome. So,
Yeah, WCW had an underrated referee crew. I don't think they get their fair shake because they had you mentioned Charles Robinson and Nick Patrick. They had
yep.
Pee Wee Anderson.
Yeah. Pee Wee was good. Yep.
Oh, who's the guy from Smoky Mountain? Mike Curtis. was there also. He doesn't get
Okay.
his fair shake as a referee also.
Right, right.
So
Yeah, it's
you just mentioned Shawn Michaels.
right.
You were there at 14 for
Yep.
Austin and Austin and Shawn,
Yep.
the crowning of Steve Austin. And
Yeah.
we've heard the stories of, this is Shawn's last match until '02. He was not in a good place in any stretch of the imagination in his personal life. There were questions on whether or not he was going to do business in the ring.
Right.
Were you told anything specific in your instructions for that match, for as far as trying to cover for Shawn or anything like that, or was it just go out there and business as normal?
It was business as normal. And the only thing was great, I mean, it was everything went smooth. I took that match from Earl. Earl got sick at that point, and I had to step up and do that match, which I had another match. So they told me, look, just do this match, focus on this main event. Um, it was phenomenal time meeting Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson was a big fan of us, man. I didn't know how much he loved wrestling until we met him that night at rehearsals and stuff. And we were at the Boston Garden, and he comes up and he's like, "Hey, Mike Chioda." And I'm like, "What?" He fucking knows my name. I'm thinking, a referee's name. And I was like, huge fan of Mike Tyson's, man. So I mean, everybody was. So and we just we had a great time, and just he went in, he didn't fuck up the finish. He counted three. That was all that's all that mattered. He knew his spot when to do it. And everything went great. I mean, I wasn't told anything. Shawn did business as a professional. He had lower back problems at that time, and through a lot of pain and a lot of issues with his lower back, I remember. So he was just he just went in there and did business like a professional.
So I have a couple more specific matches I want to hit, and then we're going to go back to those old school referees like we started off doing here.
Right.
Hogan, Rock, WrestleMania 18.
Right.
Hogan comes out. It's quite clear what the crowd's going to be like in Toronto.
Unbelievable.
What had you ever experienced anything like that before?
No, no. I mean, I've experienced a lot of different crowd pops. Stone Cold Steve Austin ain't going to take nothing away from him, and
Right.
and Undertaker and all the guys, and Hulk Hogan from way back in the day, and but that was just a different pop. I mean, that's what that shirt's back there. That's from the Rock and Hogan match
Oh,
right up
really?
there. And
Wow.
got a bunch of stuff over there, man. It's just a lot of it's from all like the Sky Dome that day and everything, and you could see a
Wow.
lot of it's from South. I got the whole room's covered with memorabilia, but yeah, that's one of my favorite matches. That Rock and Hogan signed that shirt and everything, and I mean, I've never experienced a pop like that. It was 68,000 people. I mean, that Sky Dome, and for a big dome like that to be that loud was fucking amazing, because usually domes, man, it sucks up the music, when you play the entrances on big stadiums like that. The crowd, noise goes up in the air, but that place was off the charts. It was something I couldn't even hear myself think. I had goosebumps. It was just phenomenal. I mean, all the way from the start of the entrances to the shove off to the tackle. I mean, it was just to the Hulk up. It was just like, you got to be kidding me. I mean, they didn't do shit, and they had the crowd on the entrance.
Oh, yeah.
So, and icon against icon, they pulled it off. I mean, there was doubts. I mean, there was doubts they were going to really pull off a good match, because they didn't have him last. I mean, if they
Right.
knew that it was going to be that fucking unbelievable, they would have had him on last that night. And there was a lot of talk about that, but it didn't happen. But it wound up being the best match of the night.
Yeah. People forget that poor Jericho and Triple H fought for the world title after the
Right.
Rock and Hogan.
Well, there was a girls' match after that match as well.
Oh, was there?
Yeah, I believe there was a girls' match too, a ladies' match right after that, and
Hmm.
then their match. So, yeah, it was kind of like, I mean, the crowd, the energy of that crowd was sucked right out.
Well, yeah, they were exhausted after the
Exhausted.
Rock
I
and
mean,
Hogan
just
match.
yeah, they were exhausted.
So
So yeah,
you also did Cena versus The Rock.
right.
any similarities in the audience between the two? And again, I know, Hogan Rock is. I don't know if there's going to be anything like that ever
Nothing.
again.
No, it wasn't. There was no really like a similarity in that match. I mean, it was huge. Don't get me wrong. I believe that was in Orlando or something at the stadium, right? But
That sounds right. The Orange Bowl, yeah.
yeah, the Orange Bowl, and then yeah, but no, it was nothing like. I mean, Canada. Canada is every wrestler I've known come from Canada. They all can work. They're all great wrestlers. Whether it's all the way from Bret Hart to Owen Hart's to the Benoits to the Edge to Christian to just so many Canadian wrestlers, and Canadian fans are so loyal to wrestling. And when Hogan came out, they didn't forget about Hulk Hogan, who entertained them for the last 17, 18 years at that time, maybe, and they gave it to him and they loved it. I mean, he came out, if he comes out with the red and yellow, I don't think he would have got that much of a pop, but he came out in that NWO and that music, man, and that crowd just fucking went nuts. So I mean, I literally thought like, holy shit, are they going to change the finish?
Oh,
but it was amazing.
So one more moment I want to cover that you were there for.
Right.
WrestleMania 31, Roman Brock. The fans aren't really having it because they think they can see where it's going.
Right.
Seth Rollins runs in and changes the entire night.
Entire night.
When Seth Rollins runs in to cash in, what did you experience there in the ring? Because again, the dynamic was dead for Brock and Roman, and all of a sudden everyone I remember watching that at Victoria's restaurant in Chicago, and just there, the restaurant came alive. So I can only imagine what the stadium was like in Santa Clara. So what was it like when Rollins ran out to cash in and kind of saved the night?
Well, you got to remember these stadium things where the key was. I remember when he was running down that ramp, I was like, oh, he's got to hurry. He's got a long way to go. And that's what we're always concerned about. And it was a hell of a freaking pop. But they kind of like a lot of the stadium doesn't really realize he's coming down that whole. It's almost like a delayed pop, but it was a hell of a pop. And they went nuts when, all I remember that night, I mean, as far as Seth cashing in, what a hell of a match that was at the finish and everything. Brock sold his fucking ass off, man. I mean, I remember he gashed open the hard way because he won't do no other bullshit. He'll do it the hard way then anyway. He'll either give it to you the hard way or he'll take it himself the hard way. So, and man, I'll tell you, and I'm thinking, God damn, like Brock came back, like, I never seen him fucking sell like that before. I thought he was actually, concussed.
Right.
He was fucking hurt or dizzy or something, man, or just, had his, so I mean, I was sitting there at one point, and I remember I put on the gloves. I think I put, his juicing all over the place the hard way. And next thing you know, I'm just looking at him going, what the fuck? Is he all right? Or I kept asking him, I'm like, Brock, you all right, brother? And like he's selling around the ropes and selling around the outside, coming back in, selling like a son of a gun. I'm like, I was shocked that he sold so good because I never seen him sold like that before because he was always usually like the killer beast monster. And to me, that's a professional where it's like, he was starting, they were making Roman at that time. So,
yeah,
and he had to sell to make it believable. But that was a hell of a match, man. It's one of the best of my career. That's for sure.
So there is one more that I would be remiss if we didn't mention it because the poster for it is over my shoulder. You were there for Ric Flair's last match,
right?
With Andrade El Idolo and
yes,
Jay Lethal and Jeff Jarrett.
Yep.
I thought the storytelling, especially, and this person needs to get more credit for that. Karen Jarrett,
right,
was outstanding outside the ring.
Oh yeah, she goes strong, man. She gives it all. So does Jeff.
Yes,
in there, man.
Jeff's doing some of his best work right now.
Right. I know. He's the same age as me, I think. I'm like, holy shit. When he was in that ring that night, he was fucking he was going strong. I was like, yo, he's like, oh, I'm sorry. Like he kind of hit me or something by accident. He's like, fired up. And I was like, holy shit, Jeff. Next thing you know, he's looking great on TV at AEW.
Yeah. How do you get picked as the referee, and what was that match like to ref?
Oh, it was great. I mean, just to be in the ring again on Ric Flair's last match. And I mean, they just basically had confidence in me doing the match. Conrad Thompson, I do podcast on Monday Mailbag. We're at free shows and stuff for them for about almost 3 years now. And Conrad, texted me, gave me a call, and he said, "Hey, want to know if you're interested in doing Rick. Rick would love to have you do his last match. With." And it kind of really, we didn't even really know it was going to be a tag team at that time, or if it was or it wasn't. So, and I said, "Sure, man, it'd be an honor to do Rick's last match. You tell him I'm in, So I wound up getting with him and texting him, and then it was great, man. I was just glad to be in the ring and do what I do. And I took a bump at some point where I was kind of nervous about the end of the match. Hopefully, everybody was checking on him, though everybody took care of him, and at the end of the match, he just made it. He made it all the way through. I mean, in the locker room, man, he's doing like 100 squats, and I'm thinking, geez, if I did 25 squats, I'd be fucking hurting right now. But he's unbelievable, man. Rick is just something else, man, with the energy and the charisma he's got. Phenomenal, man. Love him.
As you look back on your career, if there was if you were going to show your career to somebody, but you were going to summarize it in one match, this is the one match I want you to watch from my career. What match would that be?
That's a good question. Damn, I really never got that question before.
I mean, I'm only asking you to narrow down like 35 years or so.
Yeah, no,
this is fine.
That's pretty good. I mean, there's a ton of matches where I've done hour marathons, and Shawn Michaels with the Rougeaus and tag team with the Rockers back. I used to love those matches. But,
wow.
And we, with the Bulldogs and them, but the match there's a match between, I want to say, probably Chris Benoit, Eddie Guerrero, and it was a pay-per-view on a SmackDown one night. And I took like 3 bumps, and I still finished the match. I took like 3 major bumps. I remember I took a headbutt, I took this, I took that. Still finished the match. It was one of the unbelievable matches, but I can't really. Probably that one, or there's matches between Kurt Angle and Shane. I used to love to do, and Kurt Angle and who else? Kurt Angle and Benoit again, and Kurt Angle and Brock. I mean, there's so many great matches. It's hard to really pinpoint just one match in my career.
So from what I see, Benoit and Guerrero pay-per-view was ECW One Night Stand 05.
Right. In Colorado, I believe.
Okay.
Like that. I think it was in Denver, man. That was a hell of a match. Hell of a match that night.
Final question.
Yep.
This is when we're going to go back to the classic referees.
Gotcha.
If everyone does their Mount Rushmore of everything.
Right.
Do you put yourself on the Mount Rushmore of referees of all time? Because I think you should.
Appreciate that. I hope I could be that 4th one on there. To me, it's like, I mean, I'm so glad Tim White and WWE and Vince and everybody and Hunter, they put Tim White in there as because he's done everything for the company, to taking care of Andre, to doing this, to referee and agent. And God bless him, man. I love Timmy White. He was definitely a legend and an icon to me, and a good friend, really good friend, dear friend. Yet Joey, I would love for them to have a little bit of heart for Joey Morella to get up in the Hall of Fame and up in the Mount Rushmore, because I believe, with the Hogan and Andre match that he had done, and so many other matches that he has done in his career before he passed, should take him to that start of, because it was Joey in the beginning, and Earl should be up in there too. So, I mean, I hope I get a 4th spot in there, but there's so many other, good referees too in there and everything. I mean, you can't take anything away from Charles Robinson. You can't take him, Tommy Young back then, and all that other stuff. So Nick Patrick did a lot. I mean, there's just a lot of refs, I just wish they can make that Mount Rushmore out of 6 people.
Right. It's very difficult, because to me, Tommy Young's got to be on it.
Right.
Just
I
and
mean, these guys started way before I did. I
right,
mean, they may have not had the longer, the longest career that I had with the company with WWF, WWE. But I mean, these guys go way back too, 70s into the 80s. I started in 87 refereeing. Didn't make my TV debut to 89. So,
right,
um, and I always tried to give them my best out there. And I was, I was either pinpointed by the wrestlers, hey, I want Chioda to do my match, or the agents or Vince, and they had these, production meetings. I was always important, like if Earl had this match, I had another important match,
right.
So it was great. I had a great career, and I really I don't look back at it at all. I've been to 60 different countries and traveled around the world and around
Wow.
the country, all over the country and throughout a lot of countries and all over the country, Germany, here, Ireland, everywhere. Had a great career, man. So I mean, as a referee in the WWF, who thought you would have a career and travel like that around the world? It was great. There's no other sport that would give you that. No baseball, football wouldn't
No.
travel that much. No college could teach you anything like I've learned traveling in different countries and different cultures and all that. It's been a phenomenal career.
Well, this has been a phenomenal interview, and don't tell
Thanks,
anyone,
man.
but this is probably my favorite one I've done.
Oh, that's cool, man. Thank you, TJ.
I love talking old school stuff, and
Yeah,
it's such an interesting perspective to me to get it from a referee, the traffic cop in the match, as opposed to
right.
someone who was in it.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, I'm going by like I just put a patent on third man in the ring, and I'm working on a book, and I'm doing some other things. I've always said, I've always been the third man in the ring, so it's kind of caught on to me.
Nice. Well, keep us afloat on that because I will
Yeah,
buy it
sure.
immediately.
Ah, that's cool. Thank you, brother.
But
Thank you.
thank you for your time,
You got it. Thanks
and
for having me, TJ. Appreciate
hope
having me on the show, man.
hope to see you bounce around somewhere again in the not too distant future.
You
Don't
got
go
it.
away, is what we're saying.
You got it, man. Not yet. Not yet. I got a few good more years.
All right. Thank you, Mike.
All right. Thank you, Teach. You guys take care, man. You take care, brother.